Hi, everybody. Welcome to
Hi.
the Semi-Sages of the Pages live deep discussions.
Hello, everybody. Great to see you. Or you just see us, I guess.
Ho- Hopefully, you're here to chat and talk as we find out what you really think, or we have great, lively reflections slash debates in the comment as we follow up on one of our really exciting discussions. We released a fun video on July 19th where we asked the questions: do writers have an obligation to address political issues in their work? And we were thinking, I think, more spec fiction when we did the episode, but we were so excited to get feedback and discussion and brilliant analysis to like show us different perspectives that we wanted to go even deeper. And so one of the comments that we got that really sparked today's discussion, Teresa's going to read it for us, is
Every author has a bias and agenda, every single one.
every author. So in the comments, we are hoping to get a lively discussion. So in the comments, tell us, do you think that's true? Hello, everyone who's tired. Thank you for being here. We're so excited to see you and have you comment. What do you think? Do you think that we are bound by our bias as authors, or do you think we can escape our bias as authors?
And while everybody is typing, gonna go ahead and just say we're gonna be doing this monthly. So we're gonna be talking about hot topics monthly. So let us know if you have any hot topics and come join the discussion.
And I want to mention two things. One, we really want to foster discussion. I see everybody's in the chat already. Hello, welcome. Put your opinions in there. We're going to have, this is going to be a back and forth. So Morgan's already prompted one of the things we want to talk about. But we do want to mention, just in case, everyone, this is a respectful place. We're going to be talking about kind of deep issues, sometimes controversial issues in these deep dives. And our important part here is that we are exploring the issue. We're not judging each other. We're not making comments about each other. It's not personal topics. It's not pointing fingers or blame or accusing other people. None of that ever. It's always respectful, and it's always us examining the issue together.
Well, and I think I mean, everyone in the chat, they're already so bright and they're getting,
Yeah.
they're already
Yeah,
getting
this is
right.
great.
Like, you're absolutely
Yeah.
right. These comments from Miles are absolutely on point. So, this idea that bias is seeping into everything, and I think even in our understanding or our acknowledgement of bias, and even our discussion in all discussions, we know that bright people disagree. And we know we're better off from having conversations where people have different perspectives. I don't think it ever serves anyone when we all just are like, oh, yeah, it's that simple. But I think we're all kind of in the chat coming from a place where we all get that our biases seep in. And then what I think sparked such a lively discussion last time we got together was what our definition of political was.
Yep.
Mhm.
And so that became so fascinating, and it blew up the Discord and blew up the thread, and people really wanted to engage with like what is political. And for our purposes, we kind of want to transcend. And I already get the idea that the people in our Discord and our chat get it, but we wanted to like transcend just the micro US politics. So we're not talking about Democrat and Republican here. We're talking about a more like a larger scale of what is political. So how a government is structured and what the government does and how it influences people or
Or beyond just government, society. What do we value in a society? How does society work? What is power structures? Who has power, doesn't have power? How we should treat each other if we don't have power or if we do. That kind of thing. It's really, like you said, transcendent in versus just this more narrow view of current politics in America.
well, let's ask that in the chat because I would actually like people's opinion on that.
I'd love that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I have an opinion and I want them to persuade me. So tell me, do you think that politics does include society? Does it actually include like religion?
Does it include gender?
Yeah. Or do you think those are separate?
Mm.
Like when we talk about politics in fiction, do we have some kind of box that goes in, or are we using it in kind of maybe we're using it so open that it becomes meaningless? Because that's a really big problem too. If we're just using it in terms of human connection, well, that seems too broad. That seems almost too nebulous. So how do we begin to start packaging it in a way that is not so open that it's just like social mores, for example?
Ooh.
Yeah, so I want to bring up, we've got a lot of people in the chat commenting,
Yeah.
but I want to bring up one from Miles Joyner. I apologize if I say anybody's name incorrectly here. I'll just do my best.
We'll
Right?
fix it. Tell us.
Yep.
Huge thank you to Miles too for so many comments. These are
Yep.
great.
Thank you.
The one I want to highlight is they're saying everything being said is true. Thank you. It's because we're smart. No, it's also because
We're
storytelling.
semi-smart. That's why we're the semi.
I
We
really,
don't get too crazy.
yeah, I really love this comment. It's also because storytelling is exploring views, including your own and others.
Oh, that's an excellent point. Well, and that's a huge part of what I think we're trying to do with telling stories is we're trying to talk about experiences. We're trying to talk about emotions. So does society become a part of that? Does politics and however we're defining it become a part of that?
For me, like personally, I think it has to, because this intersection of your values and how you view society and how you view an ideal society informs how you want your government to function. And it informs how you believe your government should function or shouldn't function, and what it should do and what it shouldn't do, and what its limitations on power maybe should or shouldn't be. I think that all informs itself. It's an all encompassing kind of situation. So that's how I was viewing it.
Are you talking about that from the author's perspective, or are you talking about that from a character's perspective? Because I was listening to it, I thought it was interesting, but I wasn't sure. Like, are you saying as authors, when we're doing our worldview, that that's what we're really saying, is that our bias comes in the way we even create the rules for our world building, which would make sense that science fiction and fantasy would have more politics involved. Well, and also, right, political intrigue, because their type of world building and the type of conflicts that happen in that genre would lend themselves more to those kind of discussions. Where would that translate as much in like a horror or a cozy mystery or a romance?
Go ahead, Teresa. It looks like you have a thought on this.
Not too much.
I have a lot of
No. I think this is great. This is a really great point.
100% agree, except for the whole horror and cozy romances. I actually think horror explores a lot of our fears, and I think politics can play into that. You can have horror around climate change. You can have an apocalypse that happens because of climate change. So,
or war.
Or war. Yeah, a war. Yeah, absolutely. So is that inherently political? I don't know. Romance. Romance, again, if you're going to define political as how we view society, romance absolutely comes into play because it's about dating and it's about social mores. And there's a lot of different genres when it comes to romance. I mean, there's bully romance. There's romances that glorify that fetish rape. Let's just go there. There are, no judgment, but is that political?
We have oh, go ahead. I was going to say we have another great comment.
I want to hear what the smart people have to say.
Yeah.
Thank goodness I was starting to lose.
I want to highlight too. Sue seeing the world, we are exposed to our parents' viewpoints from the beginning. Those viewpoints make an impression on us, which lasts a lifetime. I have seen as people age and explore the world, their viewpoints change. Right? This is a really great point. We might have to come back and touch on that one. Miles with another great point as well, talking about horror is usually more allegorical in relationship to politics. Like, for example, they give the example of Dawn of the Dead as about consumerism. We've talked about Alien being a forced penetration. right? There's a lot of them that, and I think Teresa, you started with this, where it's allegorical, it's exploring fears, and sometimes those fears are quote basic, right? It's a person running, chasing us through the woods with a chainsaw, and sometimes they're more existential, and that can slip into politics. Or even I'm
Mm-hmm.
thinking Cabin in the Woods, right? Is a huge commentary about
I love that
how
one.
society functions and what we're willing to sacrifice in order for the greater good, right? Which is, I would argue, political.
Well, and Cabin in the Woods as well. And I'm so sorry, spoiler alert. Go watch it. Fantastic. But Cabin in the Woods has this fantastic, fantastic scene where people are betting on how people are gonna die.
Yep.
Like, A, that's horror, and B, there's something societal about that, about how human beings we pit ourselves against each other.
And the
Uh,
desensitization of violence and yep.
yeah, there you absolutely can say that there's something there. There's conversation to be had. Is it
Well,
political? I don't
well,
know.
it's interesting because I mean, okay, I'm going to out myself. I'm sorry. Here we go. I have a master's in political science. And one of the things that we talk about in political theory right away when we start talking about politics is the idea of the humans. Of course, Aristotle said man, but being a social animal. And this idea of resource scarcity. And so when you're talking about cabin in the woods and you're talking about competition and predation, you're talking about early political systems being under like warlords that would take other groups that would then get larger into kings that would then become empires. And then, as we know, would slowly evolve into a few times in history being like republics and democracies. A few times, if we can even call them that, really, right? And so when you get back to like cabin in the woods and fear, and you go back to the allegorical idea of politics, I think Miles is making this really like brilliant point. Well, I know Miles is making a brilliant point about the importance of how this idea of us being a social animal and the power dynamics is inherently political. And that's, Molly, what I think you keep coming back to.
Yeah.
But maybe it's not. Maybe there's another way to see politics that doesn't have that. And if you have a different view, we would love to hear it in the chat because
Yeah.
I think that right now that's kind of where my mind is, but I'm totally open to changing.
And to kind of build on this whole power struggle, I took this question to my threads and my Facebook, and we had a ton of comments about it. And whenever someone would say, "Absolutely not, politics does not belong in fiction," I would say, "Okay, what about dystopian novels? What about the Hunger Games? Do you consider that a political story?" And when we're talking about this whole power struggle thing, that's what dystopian novels are. A lot of people think they're post-apocalyptic, and that's not a requirement to dystopian stories. It just kind of is a symptom of a dystopian society a lot of times. Um, so this idea of power struggles, dystopian, is that political?
So I think dystopians have to be political because you're fighting a government. Like part of dystopian is usually power dynamics, like you said, and it's usually trying to combat I shouldn't say the government, it's usually trying to combat whatever entity is in charge.
Right.
Well, dystopia is a response to the utopian genre.
That's true too.
Right.
Starts with Plato's Republic and goes through, Thomas More and a whole host, Candide, and all of the classic utopias. And the Greek word means the good place and no place. So it's a combination of the two words, no place and good place, kind of hybrid together. So it's this idea that we know it doesn't exist. Like that was intentional. The Greeks did that when they created the genre. We know it doesn't exist, but if we could, what would the ideal good place look like? And so I love the idea that dystopians are saying, this is what people think is good, but this is what human nature will actually bring about from it. And they use the power dynamics of politics to show the darkness, at least in all the dystopians that I'm familiar with. And I would love, again, if anyone has one that I can't think of right now that would fall aside that exception.
So I have my aha moment here. By the very definition of having a dystopian, the concept of having a dystopian is you're presenting a world and you're calling it a dystopia. It's being called a dystopia. So by doing that right there, it's showing your author bias and agenda, right? How you present your world and you're saying this
Yeah.
is a dystopian world, right? If you look, we'll go back to Hunger Games because we're talking a lot about Hunger Games and it's a reference that many people, have seen or read or watched, right? If you're living in the capital area, right, and you're rich and you have all the food you want and all that kind of stuff, if a person from that perspective was writing the story, it wouldn't be a dystopian novel. It might not be a dystopian novel because for them, they're not living, so to speak, necessarily. They might not know they're living in a dystopia. But part of it is the author. The author is saying this is a dystopia. I don't know if I'm explaining this very well, but by the author saying this is a dystopia and presenting what they view as a dystopia, you're seeing what their viewpoint is and what they believe is good and bad in society, good and bad in government already. I don't know. Teresa, you look like you have a thought about that. I've said something you disagree with.
No, not necessarily disagree. I have a question I want to ask, but I'm not sure I want to go down that road.
Okay.
Better ask it then, because this is deep dives and we go
Sure.
where no one else goes.
All right. Do you think
Yeah. Ask
do you
them, do
think-
we want to go into the deep
I
dive?
will
Say
ask.
yes. I say yes. Let's wait. Let's
Are you
see who says
asking
yes.
me or are you asking our chat?
Asking the chat, because if they want us to go deeper, we'll go deeper. I want to hear what she has to say, but I don't want to offend anyone.
I can ask the second part too. So I'm going to challenge Molly's statement on District 1 didn't know that they were in a dystopian society. And people living in that power don't realize they're in a dystopian society by saying, my novel, Warehouse Dreams, please go buy it, is a dystopian novel. And the characters in power, the breads, they do know they're in a, not all of them, but they do know they're in a dystopian society. Stephen does know he's in a dystopian society. That's why he went to go work for the warehouse.
I think that's very valid, right? You shouldn't in the real world or in your books. I think it's really valid to remind yourself that your characters aren't a monolith. Groups of people aren't monoliths. Everybody has a differing viewpoint and stuff like that. And you bring up, Stephen is in a power structure from which he benefits, but he does recognize that and is trying to correct that power structure. But there are certainly people in your world and in any world who either A, are part of a power structure and they might not recognize their privilege, or B, they might recognize that they have power but want to keep power. They might not find that anything wrong with that.
You are queuing me up so well for my next question. Do you think the United States is a dystopian society?
Chat, I need you to sound off.
So you look for chat and I'll prattle.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of back up, and talk about what are some of the comments. Let's not narrow in on such a small focus, because I like this juxtaposition in the chat between allegorical, which of course goes back to the founder of Utopia, because Plato gives us the cave allegory, right, and the ship allegory, which are some of the most foundational starting points for authors in this particular genre when we're talking about politics, both the utopia and the dystopia. But from there, we get books like Animal Farm, 1984, Brave New World, Atlas Shrugged. There's a reason they're still taught in high schools. There's a reason they're still taught for the critical thinking element of it. And it's incredible how many new teachers out of college want to teach dystopias. And it's to answer your question, Teresa. They want people to think critically about their world and not just accept the norms that are. On the other hand, you could easily write the United States as a utopia.
You could. That's an interesting.
Somebody gets cancer, they can remove cancer. Somebody has a heart condition or a heart disease, they can print you a new heart and put it in. Now you don't die at 13 or 15, you're still alive at 47.
There are jobs available to most people who want one. Most people are working.
There's free school. And when they go to school, they get food and
Hmm.
air conditioning and a place out of the heat and hopefully a caring teacher.
Well,
We have
many
we have
places that's true.
we have libraries. We have knowledge available. We have a free press.
I to me I think
I
that
I know it's kind of like I keep kind of stumbling over stuff, but I'm trying not to stumble.
yeah. I think the reality is
Like,
right.
no, you guys are wrong.
I think the reality is right that real society and a society you make in a book for purposes of a book are different, you know? And real society that we live in is complex and multifaceted, and there can be areas of hope and wonder and great and places where you're like, yeah, I'm living in the future and this is wonderful and look at all this opportunity and all that kind of stuff. And there can be areas where you're like, that can be deeply upsetting as well. And you can
Because
see the
maybe tragedy
disparity.
and comedy, like tragedy and comedy exist in the same place, right?
Yeah.
But what's beautiful about novels, let's just go back to Miles' beautiful point. What's beautiful about novels is we get to explore the story.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a comment in the chat, and it was on the thread in the Discords too. I've read it a couple of times about how if you have well-rounded characters, you have to have politics because your characters will have political opinions because people in real worlds that are well-rounded in any world has a political perspective or agenda. Back to what was it? Seeing the World comment, I think was
Yeah.
that talked about that, right? And talked about the importance of
Diversifying, learning,
Yeah.
expanding your viewpoint.
yeah. And so what I think about that is so beautiful about an author is that it gives us that like exploration. So do you guys agree that by just formulating well-rounded characters, there is a political discussion? Even you may not even have a agenda, but maybe you want to set a platform for discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the choices you make if you choose to have an LGBTQIA character.
There you go. Even the age that you choose to talk about.
People's professions. It can ripple. All this stuff can ripple out.
How? Let's go into that. Let's like tease that out. How does it? Yeah, Molly, jump in.
Yeah, so something I think, okay, we're not talking a lot about craft in this one, but I'm going to mention a small craft one, right? This is a really brilliant strategy that you can use to differentiate characters who might be on, let's say, the same side of a fight or the same side of an issue, because just because you're in agreement on an overall thing doesn't mean you are in agreement about everything. Doesn't mean you're in agreement about strategies for how to achieve your goal, right? So you see this kind of conflict, inter-character conflict is a really common thing in a lot of novels in terms of, well, okay, you might see a guerrilla group, right? And you might have one character that is okay with, anything goes. It's all means to an end. I don't care who I have to kill to get what I want. And you might have another character that says, no, if we do these things, we're just as bad as the people oppressing us. And we have to hold ourselves to higher morals. And suddenly, even though they might agree on the overall thing, now you have a different conversation. You have interesting dynamic between characters. You have disparities. You have tension and conflict as well, which are interesting, right? That's what makes stories interesting.
Well, to your point, politics is so much about the individual freedom versus the collective survival or the collective good. So individual and collective good is like the most common trope, especially in utopias and dystopias, right? But for sure in fantasy, for sure in sci-fi. And I think that you don't think that is true, Molly.
On sci-fi, I would disagree, but continue.
You would.
I would, but I'll continue. You're making a very valid point.
I was thinking about Ender's Game and then Star Wars and then and so Ender's Game. Yeah, and Philip K. Dick loves this tension too. So if you're a Philip K. Dick lover, you know where I'm going with this.
It's great tension. I 100% agree. It's very, very valid. I don't think it's the most important one in science fiction, but it's very, very valid.
Did I say that? Curious
I don't
about
know. Maybe I just misheard.
because what I was trying to say was that that genre
Mm-hmm.
deals with it more than any other genre
I agree.
because that genre
I
is
agree. It
dealing with
deals
the
with it a
idea of
lot.
the individual and the sort of tension.
Yep,
And you really see that in Ender's Game,
you do.
where you have this idea of the hive mind, right? And then the individual and that kind of tension. And so, when our last like 5 minutes, I want to actually do takeaways for authors. And so, one of my takeaways for this conversation that I hadn't really thought about before was the importance of infusing the tension between the characters, not just in what they want, which is a lot of times what craft books tell you, is just have them want different things, but have those wants placed in one person's maybe being more selfish and one person more, think of Han Solo, right? Like he's the ultimate trope for like the internal conflict between like he wants to be selfish, but then he keeps doing the right thing and helping everyone out. And we love him so much because he's like the epitome, or at least I love him so much. You can disagree with him. I love being disagreed with, so don't stress about that.
Be upset with Han Solo.
Right? If you don't like Han Solo, too bad for you. But I think anytime the characters themselves start dealing with the I feel this, but the good wants me to do this, then we get beautiful, complicated villains that we have compassion for. And I think sometimes as writers, writing our villains can be the hardest thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think using political tricks or agendas might be a way for us in any genre to like make our villains deeper. So that is what I'm going to take away from this and what I learned from all of you and your genius takes.
I want to say, so Sue seeing the world. First, I have one thing to say, which is she might not be expecting this, but it is her birthday. So happy birthday.
Birthday. Happy birthday, one of our biggest fans.
Yeah, we love you.
We're your biggest fans too, though.
And I think she brings up a great point that we've been touching around on this, but okay, she says, the collective good. I have issues with this. Who decides what the good is for the collective? We each have our own definition of what is good for ourselves and for our country. Absolutely. Right? And this is where you can bring in really interesting conflict. This is where you can have two characters who have a different definition, two or three or more characters who all think that they're doing good things, all have a different definition of good. And that's how you get, like Morgan said, complex villains that the reader might even relate to and understand even when they know they're the villain, because the villain thinks that, okay, they're doing what's best. They're doing a good for the collective. Potentially.
And I love that too because I love the books that aren't so American. They always sell American books because in American books there's a good guy and a bad guy.
Yep.
And is it Thomas Mann who I think talks about how there is no such thing. Everyone believes they're the good guy.
Always. We're all the heroes in our own journey.
Right?
But I guarantee somebody does not think that. Even if it's the person you accidentally cut off on the road, they do not think you're a hero right now.
I think so. My takeaway as an author is actually kind of an empathy exercise. So what Teresa is saying, like, I would challenge you as humans and as writers, as storytellers, however you consider yourself, like when you are going through your day-to-day life, when someone does something to you, like cuts you off in traffic, or they say something that you don't understand, you think it's rude, or whatever it might be, instead of in your head thinking, okay, they're an idiot, okay, they're a bad driver, whatever you might think, try reframing it in your head.
Pop their tire.
Yeah, I was gonna say, try reframing it in your head and imagining, why does this person think that they're the hero of their story? Right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they cut me off because their dad's in the hospital and they're rushing to get there. Maybe they did this thing because whatever, blah, blah, blah. Like, make up those stories in your head. And I think that it's helped me a lot for making characters that even when I don't agree with my character and I think they're doing something incredibly stupid or that I morally disagree with or whatever it might be, still having that understanding of, okay, they think it's a hero, this is how they're justifying it. I think it's very helpful.
I like it. I think my key takeaway is to remember to, as I'm building in-depth characters, that I need to think about their political leanings too, and intentionally choose them and intentionally be aware of my own biases.
That's
And
brilliant.
yeah,
Then
and
just accidentally seek through. Because everybody in the chat knew right away. They were like, yep, we can't avoid our biases. They're here.
no, we all
So,
are.
yeah, so acknowledging, even pushing back on our own biases, like what a beautiful way to arc back to that. So we don't know if you like deep dives. This is our very first chance at it. We love to go live. We wanted to actually talk to brilliant writers and welcome and expand our community. Let us know in the chat if you want us to do more deep dives. If you have any ideas about what we should do, you can tell us in the chat, tell us on our Discord. We really enjoyed talking. I'll just speak for myself. I really enjoyed this today. Thank you so much. What did I forget?
I think a huge thank you to everybody who participated in the chat. It's always uncomfortable going live because you don't know if anyone's going to show up. So huge thank you to everybody who showed up and people who commented and helped us keep the conversation going. I'm tired and overly transparent.
Shout out. Yeah, shout out to Brilliance. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you all for joining. We love you, and we hope to see you in a month for our next deep dive topic.
Oh, and if you are stuck on a novel and you're in the middle of a novel and you need help, we're running not a little, it's amazing. We're running like a 1-day thing where we're going to support each other and workshop and pull our manuscripts out and get going. Because if you have an idea that's stuck, but that story's been nagging you and you need support, or you've shelved it, or you got feedback you don't know what to do with, or you just life got in the way, it's for you. Does anybody want to share details?
I just put a link in the chat. It's 3 hours, virtual, hands-on, small group. Come join us.
Yeah.
August 17th, 10 a.m. Pacific.
And you'll get one-on-one critiques from us on your pages too, and a lot of like anything you want. Like if it's just style or support, we're here to. It's very small. We're not letting that many people in, so
Come join us. It'll be fun.
All
right. Thanks, everyone.